Hi, Dina. I'll just wait for you to request and we can get started. Yay.
Hi,
Hello.
good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning. How are you? It's
It
really morning by you.
is morning. Yes. But we're early risers, so by 8 a.m.
Yeah?
by 8 a.m. there's a lot of activity in my house.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's my dream. But for now, I'm enjoying the freedom to be late risers.
Why is your dream
So
to be early risers?
I just I would love it. I just feel like it would bring more, I don't know, more productivity into my day. It's kind of like I wake up sometimes like a little bit later than my kids, and then it's like I
You're
feel like
ca-
I'm catching up all day.
I get
It's
that.
like when a teacher, like my husband's a teacher. If he's going to walk in late to the class, it's going to be a different day.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Such a good analogy. It's so true. Like
Yeah.
they've already gotten into whatever they're getting into, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
yep, I
Yeah,
get that.
exactly.
Yeah, that was actually something that I incorporated a couple years ago of wake, like just getting out of bed
Yeah.
early and having
Yeah.
my own time in the morning. You know, it's like people,
Yeah.
the whole thing on social media is always like, what's your morning routine? You know? And now I kind of have one of those. So,
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah. In good time, I will too.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Sure. It's a pleasure. I'm so glad we get to speak in person now. I mean, in
This is
person-ish
as in person as it gets for now.
right now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, where do we begin? I mean, there's so much to talk about here. So much we can say.
What's been coming up for you? Like, what are you in talking about joy with food and just being in you know, for you it's interesting because we've only connected in the past couple of months,
Yeah.
and you joined, you got one of my programs called the Joyful Family Meal, which is a program that segments, you know, the space and the prep and the meal, because the meal is the thing that everybody's often very focused on, like how do I make, and particularly dinner time, you know, how do I make the meal a better experience. And so I really break down all
Yeah.
the ways that we can engage our kids in that. But then while we started chatting, I said, well, you know, I'm starting my program Kids in the Kitchen, or it actually had started, I think, the day before or something, and then you
Hmm.
joined. And so now
Yeah.
you've been in, you know, two programs of mine, and we've gotten to know each other a lot. I would love to know, you know, what's standing out for you.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of what I've shared a little bit already with like people who are interested, that what I specifically have loved when I came to your program was the gentleness that you bring to the food arena. And, I share this in different posts and things. Like, I wasn't always a kind, gentle parent. I was very authoritarian for a long time. And so as I started learning about and becoming a gentler parent, um, I, I also, food is a very big part of that. Food is something we do 3 times a day and in between. And so there was a lot out there that put itself out there as the kind and gentle approach, but inside of me, like the language, the narratives just didn't feel gentle, didn't feel kind. And what I loved about, when I found your page and when I found the things that you share, I was like, oh, okay, you get it. Like, you get me. And so that's something that I really appreciated. And also the second piece that is so important to me, especially recently, is that how you're so aware of meeting the parent where they're at and the family where they're at. And we're not like coming and just throwing ideals at a family and like, here's all the things you should do. I think especially for people, those of us who are like really yearning for gentler parenting and loving parenting, we're more likely to take on too much in a way because we want it so much, right?
Such a point, and that's such a pattern.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like to a degree I did that as initially coming into, shifting my parenting in a big way. I was like really pushing myself, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it. Like it was important. I wanted to make big changes. And at the same time, though, it did come to a point where I was like, okay, but I haven't been thinking about myself at all. Like I've forgotten about myself. I'm not at all part of this equation. And so now I feel like it's like, you're at one extreme, you go to the other extreme, and then you like center out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, that's where I'm finding myself to be, is kind of like centering a little bit, where it's not that I'm letting go of anything that I believe in. It's just that I'm also remembering that I don't have to do it all now. I don't have to be doing let's say, for example, like how ideal it is to like stop what we're doing and turn to our child and listen to them when they're talking to us, right? It's great. It's so powerful. At the same time, if I'm pushing myself to do that all the time, because that's so ideal, I'm losing myself. I'm going to wear out. I'm going, And so just to be able to like allow myself to do it when I can.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing that into. So that's what I just like felt like I really picked that up from what you offer, is that meeting parents where they're at.
Yeah.
And it's really powerful.
Yeah. And, I think it's so well said. And I think that what you're highlighting is, there is this inclination sometimes of all or nothing, that we're not consciously deciding, okay, I'm going to overhaul my life right now, and I am going to start and go all in. But it's coming from a good place, and we're motivated by change. So then we feel like, well, it has to look like me doing this all the time. And I get that question a lot when it comes to food, because especially when I talk about, one of the best ways to support our kids in creating a really highly connected and positive relationship with food is actually inviting them, like making the space of the kitchen inviting for them, so that they can participate, so that meals are not a surprise, and we're not just serving them a plate of food that then who knows what will ensue after that, which can be so stressful, right? The more with anything in life we create connection, but then sometimes what people will take that to is that they need to have their kids by their side in the kitchen all the time, or they will, or they'll start with dinner, because dinner feels like the biggest problem for a lot of people, or the biggest, it's the most overwhelming. And so Deena said that if I bring my kids into the kitchen, it'll help with the overwhelm, because they'll be more highly connected. But if that space is, it's like often people are the most tired, they have the least capacity, it's everybody's end of the day, and whatever emotions and experiences they had are just going to come out at that time. So there's a lot to that. And so that's why I actually, for most families, don't advocate for that. And it's knowing, like, when do you have the most capacity, so that you can take more space and time in the kitchen. And that's just, that's just one example of how we can be more gentle with ourselves, and also recognize that, like, this engagement with food, I feel, is such an opportunity to grow and change and shift and invite in, more highly connected ways of living in all areas of life. Because just like parenting, right? Parenting is an everyday thing. Food is an everyday thing, and I say that all the time. And I think that because of that, that's where people are often like, yeah, I know. And it's relentless. And I just, it's much for me. So we have to.
Yeah, it's it can be very tiring.
Yeah. It's, and I'm curious, when you were saying, like, the more that there was like a narrative that you wanted to challenge around the conversation around food, what is that narrative, or what do you feel like is a more pervasive way that a more common way that people talk about it, that you're ready to shift?
Yeah, sure. I don't love some of the parts of the DOR. It feels very controlling in a way, very power. What's the word? Power over. Like I don't know if that's the right word, but like,
do you want to say
I'm the parent? Yeah. So the I'm correct me if I don't say it.
Sure.
Right. The division of responsibilities is the idea that the parent is responsible for what is being served, when and where,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
what is and when and where food is being served, and the child is responsible for if and how much. Like, I think that they get to decide if they would like to eat it or not. And then what often follows from that is, this is what's for dinner. And, you know, there are no other options. And I actually want to like bring some nuance into here. It's also possible to, I believe that it's also possible to say, like, this is all I'm able to make right now. But I see it more as on an individual meal basis. For example, I don't want to make a rule across the board that I'm never going to make you an alternative for dinner if you don't like it, because if I have the energy and the capacity, I don't need to live according to some principle that says I shouldn't give my child another choice. I want to have the flexibility as a parent that if I'm feeling I have the energy, I'm feeling I have that compassion in me right now, I have that extra space to give, then I'd like to give my child an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
Not, and so, but then at the same time, like, there may be times where I will say, like, hey, I really don't have the energy to make anything else for you right now, or I'm not up to it. But it's more about what I'm up
Yeah.
to rather than some
Yep.
rule that I need to follow.
Yep.
So that's like the example.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so true, because it's when, there's a lot of things that are part of this. And I think we often, because the division of responsibility model, which was, created by this woman, Ellen Satter, who is, like a proclaimed feeding expert in the intuitive eating world. And I think because it's meant to be a model for families, but particularly the goal of it is to raise confident, good eaters. Like, that's the point of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what all her books are about, and everything that she writes about. But I think that we also forget the impact, or like the potential other invitations and possibilities for children and for adults here, because these models that are geared towards kids are so heavily focused on the kids, so the rules are on the kids. But by putting the rules on the kids, we're also putting rules on ourselves that then we feel like we can't, that there isn't any nuance or other options available. And underlying that is that it's assuming that because it's all about roles and jobs. The job of the parent is the what, when, and where. The job of the child, if and how much, clearly defined. And I understand for sure the inclination to want it to be siloed. So there's no question. Fear bound is what it is. But then it doesn't really leave room for, like, what about children being fully involved in the process of making those decisions, right? Like, one of the biggest wins families have when I work with them is moving dinner away from the dinner table sometimes, because just being at the dinner table can often feel like a lot of stress and pressure. And now we're sitting here and we're eating and we're talking, and it kind of depends on how old your kids are. I mean, it depends on a million things: how old your kids are, their personalities, their patterns, what's going on in the day, in the time before that. We have to be able to look at all of these and then say, like, okay, well, what is my goal? What do I want to feel at mealtime? And so, and parents, like the adults, are not actually connected with their food at all. So it's just a means, and they're kind of like shoveling food in, if they're even getting an opportunity to eat, because they're usually focused on behavior or other kids or their kids' bites. And that is, there's a few things here. First of all, that leads to oftentimes like a not positive relationship with food for the parents. And then so that sucks for the parents. That's like not what we're trying to do. And then you have your children, that's the model that they grow up with. So we have to take a step away from that. And because a lot of this work in these like eating and feeding experts is around creating like positive eating habits and helping your child stay at the table and da-da-da-da. I don't really think that, I don't think we have to do that for our children. I think that completely model beautiful eating habits and a positive relationship with food and politeness and all these things, while also recognizing that your family in this season of life might do best to be sitting on the floor in the living room with plates, like maybe laying out something just to protect the rug, whatever is practical, and just playing a game.
I love
And
that.
then that's the and everybody gets an opportunity to eat their food and chew their food and digest well and feel fulfilled and feel highly connected to the food and the people.
Yeah.
Like, but this division of responsibility model, if the parent is dictating the where, and the where is always like at the table or at the kitchen island, then that may not leave room for what is going to create a more highly connected relationship with food. And I'm not saying it has to be on the floor. I'm just saying, like, what are the other options? And of course, always dictating the what is not going to provide an opportunity for the children to gain a really highly connected relationship with that food, because that is, you know, think about the long-term goal for our children.
Yeah.
Most people, when I ask that question, like, what do you want your children to know about their bodies? What do you want them to know about food? What do you want them to know about diet, health, nutrition, whatever it might be? They're talking about wanting their kids to have these skills, to be able to listen to their bodies, to be able to nourish themselves well.
Yeah.
Well, if these rules or these things are so siloed, first of all, you know, they're not going to get that, or that's going to be much harder to get that. And further, it's a lot of a burden for parents.
Yes.
So that's really hard. That's a really hard thing. The more we invite our children in for collaboration and participation in ways that feel good, we can, you know, we can bend those rules. And I think this is, to me, like the crux of it all when it comes to how all of these experts out there talk about food for families, which really is food for kids, because we have like the adult conversation over here and the kid conversation over here, and it makes it so much harder for everybody involved.
Yeah, that's something you said there reminded me. Another thing that would bother me about that approach. Well, first, by the way, I just want to say, like, I'm guessing that the intention behind this approach is just to protect the parent's energy and to help, you know, to kind of like try to lessen the amount of stress, which I get it, but actually in the long run, I don't know if it actually, I mean, maybe it does for some people, but for me, it didn't. But something else that bothered me about that approach was the idea that I would be like, there was this like inner questioning inside of me when I would be saying those lines, like, no, now is not time to eat. We're only eating at this and this time. And this like thought would cross my mind, and I would kind of like try to ignore it at first, but then I would pay attention. I'd be like, well, I get to eat whenever I want.
Yes.
I get to decide whenever I can eat.
Yes.
Why? There's two parts to this. Number one, how is that appropriate that children have, you know, this rigid rules around eating? And it's just not, it's simply not fair in my mind that, no, you are not allowed to eat now. It just doesn't feel fair. And then second of all, how is that a practice for real life?
Exactly.
Where is the real experience? And
not. I mean, I don't.
It's not. Exactly. I don't see that it is.
Yeah. I don't think that's like an underlying goal of these models when you really get into it. And
exactly.
They're often based on, you know, different types of parenting. You and I are both homeschooling families. And by the nature of choosing that path, I would say most homeschoolers, there's a million different ways to homeschool and different approaches. But what I find is a common thread is this, you know, paradigm shift, or this like embracing of an idea that our children are not just in the box of being kids, and that they have to be taught and guided by everything all the time, that they do have the capacity, like that learning happens everywhere, every day, that, you know, that these ways in which we are engaging with the world around us in a, you know, in such a different way. And the division of responsibility model, or are these things that are like on these Instagram accounts that have millions of followers, they're not doing life the way we're doing life. And they're not guiding their children in those ways. That's just, I think that's baseline. And it's important to know.
In a way, as a homeschooler, it actually is tempting, even more tempting, to want to have that structure around food that's so clear cut right? Because we're doing food all day. The kids are eating all day.
Yeah.
And so in a way it would be very tempting, but I come back to this principle of mine that I've learned over the last few years in my own experiences, that as mothers, we are born nurturers, we are born givers. And these kinds of rules, I really believe it takes us away from that nurturing way of being,
Yes.
and we just aren't happy that way. It's not a happy place to be when we can't be nurturing. And again, I want to say, like, being
Beautiful.
nurturing doesn't mean we're doing everything for our child all the time. It may
No.
not mean we're making them every meal they want at every moment. There is a way to set a limit in a nurturing way, but I didn't find that in these kinds of approaches. So yeah, I mean, I love that
So
there's nuance here, that there is, you know, creativity as well, when we're willing to like let go of like rules that are set, like, well, we only eat it, it's only appropriate to eat at a dining room table. Like, well, why?
right.
Can we
Why?
question that? Well, why?
What's your answer there?
Right. And sometimes the answer is just like, well, that's what we do.
Mhm.
And well, that answer is like not good enough for
Or just
me.
or the appropriate thing. Like you might say,
Yeah.
that's what we do. If you go under that, it's these are rules, and this is like a lot of what we unpack in my programs is like, if you have a food rule, if we only eat at the dining room table, first of all, is that actually consistent?
Yeah.
What happens when your kids are in bed? Where are you eating? Are you eating on the couch while you're watching a movie? Are you eating in the car? Are
Hmm.
you eating like what else goes on in terms of where people eat?
Exactly.
That's first of all, like, well, is that actually true?
Yeah.
And where did that rule come from? That
Yeah.
might be like your mother's or grandmother's or father, whoever's voice in your head. And what will someone think if, we have to go down that path and then understand like, oh, maybe this is like actually not my rule at all. Like when we really dig in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be willing to question, and be willing to just ask questions, like, yeah, just like, hey, well, maybe not, just maybe. And maybe you'll come back to maybe yes. But
Totally.
let that maybe yes be a conscious one.
Yep. Yeah. And you can try things out, and you can let your kids see that you're trying things out. And then you may realize like, okay, there's crumbs everywhere, or this and this is happening, or now there's ants in the house, whatever's going on. And
Yeah,
then you realize,
exactly.
okay, we're going to come back. But then what that does is it shows your children, first of all, that you question things,
Yeah.
and it shows your nervous system, that you don't have to be rigid, and you can question things and experiment,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to get the need. And then when you come back to, if you come back to, we eat at the table, it's grounded. It's
Yeah.
like it's come a grounded, centered place of like, yeah, this is how we do things. And having this open invitation to explore it without just taking like Ellen Satter's words, which have now become, like what it's the most interesting thing to me, that so many parenting educators out there in the gentle and conscious parenting space.
Yep.
I hear it on so many podcasts. I hear it on workshops. Like
Yep.
everybody brings in the division of responsibility model, because it is more gentle than
Right.
like, well, you have to take 3 bites, or you can't
Right.
dessert
Right.
until you eat your meal, right? Or whatever the
Yeah.
things are that are much more prescriptive. It
Yeah.
is more open and gentle than
That's
that. But I think we
true.
go so much further. And I think that
Yeah.
you know, any rule or any model in this way deserves to be challenged by
Yep.
every family.
Yep.
And, it's in an effort, like people always use the line like, well, I don't want to be a short order cook. So, okay, don't be
Right.
a short order
You
cook.
don't have to be. Exactly.
Like I have a boundary for me. Once I sit down to the table, I check in, everything's good. It's really
Yeah.
important for me, especially with my, dieting and disordered eating,
Yeah.
history. I need to enjoy my meal.
Yeah.
And of course that was different when I had a 2-year-old and whatever, but I have an 8-year-old now. And as there's certain things that can be shared. And because
Yeah.
my son,
Yes.
because it's been a value of ours, because my son is fully capable of doing most things in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If there's, it's a rare situation where he's surprised by what's on the table. But if he is, for some reason, and he really doesn't want to eat what's there, he is invited to go make
Yeah.
whatever else he wants.
Exactly. I've started to, I want to say, like, since Kids in the Kitchen, literally from the first day, like, there's been times that I have had my kids in the kitchen with me, but for a long time, like, pulled back from that.
Mhm.
And I understand myself, like, I was just too overwhelmed.
For
But
sure.
you brought it to my awareness again, and I just kind of started to become more like open to the possibility of like offering a child, you want to come do something, like, do you want to cut this vegetable for me? Or, and when they take to it, they love it, first of all. And then, second of all, by the way, it just happens to be a great thing to do. Dinner time, oftentimes preparing dinner is a very stressful time, and sometimes all you need is to remove one child. Like if you have multiple children,
Of
take
course.
one of those kids and bring them into the kitchen with you, and now prepping dinner didn't just become non-stressful, it actually became a time of connection
Yeah.
with that child.
Yeah.
And it's just so, I don't remember why I said that, but you were just saying, so,
Well,
oh, because your son,
I
right.
can get
So
up and make what he wants to.
exactly. He can get up and exactly. So I just started to teach my 6-year-old how to make her own peanut butter sandwiches. And recently,
Yay!
recently someone was in my house and she asked me for peanut butter. My 6-year-old asked me for peanut butter, and I said, "Oh, remember?" I said, "I can't do it right now." And so this other person offered, "Oh, do you want me to make it for you?" She said to my 6-year-old, and she's like, "Oh no, I know how to do it myself." And it was so adorable.
That's so good. Yes, because and then there's
Yeah.
that confidence, that like pride.
Yeah.
We 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 forget that like it is such a gift to our
Yeah.
children to be able to do these things, and they find it so cool to just
Yeah.
be like, oh, they're always looking at adults and what adults are doing, and there's a reason why most young children are always like looking forward to their next birthday. My son just turned 8, and for like 6 months he's been talking about when I'm 8 and when I'm 8 and I'll do this, and
Yeah.
that's just part of. And I remember doing that as a kid. We all do it because we're looking forward to like being able to do more, so we can absolutely hold on to that. And then what that does for us is it's just such a gift.
Yeah.
And saying before about being mothers and being nurturers, is and that we don't always have to be like so rigid with the rules, is really that balance. And I bring this into the Joy with Food program a lot, of like that balance between masculine and feminine, not like man
I love
woman,
that. I
masculine,
know.
because we all have these elements. And
Yeah.
what will often happen for us as mothers is we end up leaning so heavily on the masculine because there's project plans and there's things to
Yeah.
do and there's systems need to
Yeah.
be in place and there's rules, and and then the masculine is more like
Yeah.
more contained, it's more rigid, it has straight lines, it's linear, and we need that in our lives. But we can lean too heavily on that, and that's what for most of us as women will make us feel just burnt out,
Yes.
because we're not leaning into the softness of the feminine, the
Yeah.
actual like receiving, the receiving of the feminine energy, the like I can surrender a little bit, I can let things flow.
Yeah.
And this is an example of where we can come into more of like a receiving and a flow, where we can have the systems help our children gain those skills, and then we can say, well, I'm eating my meal now, and we can feel good in that boundary. And I can say to my son, I see that you're not happy with what's on the table, and you can make whatever you
Yeah.
want, and if you have any questions you can ask me, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah.
And that's just like,
Absolutely.
it's a softness. and
Yeah.
and then he grows up with that, which I also feel like I feel so strongly that I don't want our children to grow up with these like martyr mothers that are just doing and giving, and it's rigid, and okay, fine, I'll keep forsaking myself for you.
Yeah.
Then they grow up with that being the model, and then what happens when they want to go get partnered or where they're engaging?
Yeah.
It doesn't serve anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be either extreme. And probably many of us find ourselves in both extremes at different times of our life. And it's normal. Like, it's nothing to judge ourselves for, but there's just such beauty in that alignment of having the balance. And also, like, I find that when we're, like you said, like oftentimes we lean more into the masculine, like the rules and the like that rigidity in a way, but when it's too much. And then I feel like when we're able to lean as well into the feminine, we have access to so much wisdom and creativity that
It's
we
the
would have otherwise not thought of, not
intuition.
accessed. So
Yes. Yeah, I mean that wisdom, that creativity, that intuition, that inner
yeah,
knowing, right? Like there's like the inner critic, and then there's wisdom and intuition. And when we can soften just a little bit and we can open up our, expand our awareness to other ways of looking at things, that critic voice translates to intuition and it feels
yeah,
better. It's like that
yeah,
that thing that is, that like berating self-talk, or the thing of like you're doing it wrong or whatever it is. There's some wisdom in there, but when we can soften, then we're like, oh, my intuition is telling me that this could feel better to me.
yeah,
How?
exactly. I love that you're saying that, and it like leads into something else that I wanted to mention here about food, that it wasn't until recently that I kind of became aware that food, I guess somehow I always thought that food was just about getting that sustenance into your child's body or into our bodies, for example. And I've come to realize that it is so much more than just getting their bodies to be full.
Yeah.
Food is like this vehicle for connection and love and so much more.
Yeah.
Um, and when it's only about filling up their bodies, then we can get lost in all those rules. But when we realize it's like this is 3 times a day or 2 times a day if our kids are in school, these opportunities to make a connection to, it's like, I guess I feel like food is like something physical, and it can it grounds our love for our children in a way into something tangible, so that like when I'm bringing the plate of food to my child, I can be either just plunking it down in front of them and just on to the next, because all it is about getting the food in their bodies, or I can be like putting it down in front of them, and like as I'm doing so, I'm leaning over and like rubbing their shoulder, or I'm like looking in their face for a moment, And what I've done now is I've brought connection into this food, and now they're actually even bringing that food, like that food became infused with love, and now that's what's going to like nourish their bodies. It's really powerful.
It's really powerful. Yeah. And they feel it, they know it. Like sometimes my son will, he'll ask me to make him a snack if he's doing something else, and I will do it. And then he has this thing now that it started like, I don't know, a couple of years ago maybe, where he gets very excited about what I'm going to put on the plate and how I'm going to present it. So I'll be bringing it to him, and then he'll go, oh wait, hold on. And because he likes this big reveal, because I will put, like, I will arrange the plate in a pretty way. And what I'm talking about is,
Yeah,
here's a couple slices of cheese, here's some pistachios, here's some cut up, like it's just, but it's arranged. And then,
yeah,
Mama, it's so beautiful.
yeah,
And it just, that sense of appreciation, that sense of understanding of like creating a beautiful plate. It doesn't have to happen only on these rare occasions. We
yeah,
can do this with the simplest of ingredients, and that is
yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Um, I've also noticed that this is an interesting thing to bring in here, is that I've noticed that the more insecure I feel as a parent about what I'm offering, my children actually are responding to my nervous system. In other words, when I'm bringing a meal to the table and they're like, I don't want it, always I can look back and see that I myself was insecure, and I was expecting that they're not going to be happy, and I was like feeling like I'm not good enough, and so on and so, like there was so much, I'm bringing like all of that into the meal, and they're responding to that. And I could be creating the simplest meal, but I feel comfortable with what I'm creating, with what I'm offering them, and it could be the simplest thing that I normally they would have complained about. But if I'm like really comfortable with where I am, and I'm okay with not having made a gourmet meal, for example, I'm just like really at peace with myself, they're just like they receive it so differently. Like our nervous system has so much to do with how our children are going to enjoy their meals
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And that's your relationship with the food. That's where
Yeah.
it's like, it's your connection, it's your relationship, it's what it feels like while you're preparing that meal, you know. So often, like you were saying, the idea of just getting something into their bodies, right? Just filling them up. So sometimes that's like the what people are most concerned with. Sometimes it's more about like the individual, like nutrition. Is this just nutrition? I'm just trying to get like vitamins and minerals and this and protein, whatever, like getting this into your body. And we, that is like, that's in our systems, right? That's our food story.
Yeah.
That's our system. That's our history with this topic. And
Yeah.
that's where it, you know, there's so much of this work that is all about the families and is really understanding our kids and what's best supports them and how we invite them into the kitchen in a way that really meets them where they are.
Exactly.
What I've seen over and over again in working with families for, you know, 13 years now, mostly working with mothers, is that the thing, like the needle that really needs to move the most is in our connection and relationship with food, because that's what shifts the energy. That is what shifts the, you know, the whole tone of mealtime. It shifts what our children grow up knowing, you know, because they know and feel everything that we're doing, right? Whether it's what talking about the food, what the way in which we're serving the food, the way in which we're inviting them into the kitchen or not, like every one of those things. But we need to feel that joyful relationship. We need to recognize that food is not just a means to an end. Like get another meal on the table, eat the food.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Process to it. And there's so much that we can connect with.
Yeah.
In a way.
You know, I also used to be like on this like search for the next diet or the next nutritionist that was going to like make me thinner and all of that. Yeah. And of course that was totally a part of how I served my children, no question about it. And then several years ago when I started to learn more about intuitive eating, health at every size, and just like the idea that our bodies have the wisdom that we need. So that obviously impacted how I changed how I was, you know, offering food to my children. And I remember like many years ago, one of my kids saying to me like, yeah, someone told me that his mother puts out candy at the Shabbos table and no one even touches it because she puts it out all the time. And so they're used to it. And I was like so skeptical at the time. I was like, no way, that's ridiculous. I didn't really believe it. And then actually it's like so awesome because literally I see it in my home right now where like we let go of all those restrictions. We really like, you know, stopped controlling food. We, you know, and now like just recently someone brought a tray of candy to my home and my 4-year-old who literally like he's 4, so he hasn't had any rules around food when, you know, he was already after I shifted, and I showed him the tray and I'm like, do you want something? He did not want any. He didn't want any of it. And I'm not saying that some of my kids will eat candy, but there isn't like that desperate, you know, that desperation around snacks or candy. Like there is just, it's just not. And I think it's hard for people to believe because I know it was for me, but I'm so glad we're bringing this conversation like to my community because there's very little of this here. I feel like it's not something that most people know about, and I would love for them to know about it. Number one, because it's so much more wholesome and healthy for our children to be able to listen to their bodies. They know what they need. I see when my children finish, like when I was a child, like I for sure finished all of my macaroni or all my cheesy pasta, like whatever it was, because I was very like attached to it. And then when I watch my children, like, oh, they're like, they leave a half a plate and they're done. And I'm like, they really do know when they're done.
Yeah, I know. So, and you're not saying like, you got to finish it, or are you sure you're done, or like now I'm going to throw this away. Like there's nothing that's happening, you know. And when I say those examples of things, it's not to say that is wrong. It's just that like, you know, that won't serve. And you know, you've come into a grounded center with just, okay, that's it.
Yeah, there's so, you know, and exactly that is the second piece is I'd love for people to know more about this. Number one, just because like, yeah, it'll probably serve everyone better. And then second of all, it brings so much lightness into the whole family. We don't realize how much, this is something I speak about so often, like we don't realize how much we are carrying, how many burdens we're carrying as parents that we do not have to be carrying. They are unnecessary burdens. And if we were actually to shed the burdens that are unnecessary, parenting is not burdensome. It doesn't have to be that way. And food is a big part of that, you know?
Yep. Well, because food
So,
is like you said, you know, it's multiple times a day and it's every day. And, you know, that is where I say, like, I do believe it's a choice. I do believe there's a decision point
yeah,
for someone to say, like, I'm ready for a different story.
yeah,
It's not just like, it's not, oh, I'm ready, so it's just going to change.
right.
It's you, then you're ready to support. You're ready to
Yeah,
be in a community of others that are talking about this differently. You're ready to feel held and to expand your awareness of how you can look at this. But
exactly.
it is a decision because you can, you know, it's such a point of tension. I mean, when
Yeah,
I'm in other people's homes,
yeah,
I will feel that all the time. It's that push and pull
yes,
of,
yes,
can't eat.
yes.
Did you eat before? Or how come you're not eating? You need to eat. Like there's so much
So
conversation about that,
stressful.
right? And
Yeah,
so how many times a day, how many times a week, how many times a month, how many times a year in our child's lifetime, like how many times are we going to keep pushing on this topic? Because every time we do it, it doesn't feel good to us and it doesn't feel good to them. That we know for
okay.
sure,
Yep,
right? So you know, there can be all the memes and all the eye rolls and all the things about it, or we can get ready to embrace a different story. And I think that is like a really it's a really powerful and profound move to say,
yeah,
I'm ready. I'm ready for something different. I'm ready to
yeah,
embody something. I'm ready to just, like you said, like unload that burden.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
And it's
absolutely.
unload the burden, get to know it more, and then you will move into something that is actually extremely joyful and connected. It's like first we unload the
Exactly.
burden,
Yes.
but then we move to the other side of it being like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just that you're coming to a place of like neutral. You're actually going to go to a place where there's tremendous joy.
Yeah.
I really resonate with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's like
Yeah.
exactly what the title of your program,
Yeah.
Joy with Food.
Yeah.
Like,
It is.
amazing.
So yeah, should we take a couple minutes just to
Yeah.
talk about, okay. So
Yeah.
Joy with Food is basically, I mean, it's the crux of everything Rivkie and I have been talking about here for the parents, for the mother to feel, to know, to be embodied. Because there's all the different, like, whether it's the scripts of division of responsibility or things that we can say to our kids or things that we can kind of like pretend and try on. And, you know, without us knowing it in our bodies, as we all know, our kids see right through that. You know, anytime I've ever like tried to just say something to my son that I didn't really believe, he'll say to me like, why are you saying that? Or, you know, like, you've never said that before or something, you know, like these, right?
Yeah.
They know exactly what's going on. So we do need to, you know, it takes some inner work. It takes a bit of a process for us to really know this. And how do we know
Yeah.
this? Because we learn a little bit of body-wise education where we can have an understanding of like some things about the nervous system, some things about digestion, some things about blood sugar regulation, right? Where sugar is such a heated one. It's such a big deal.
Yeah.
So we can, you know, part of it is what you were sharing on the intuitive eating of not having the strong restriction.
Yeah.
But in order to be able to also feel confident in that, there's still some, you know, there are some like boundaries that can be held if you want to when it comes to sugar. And part of that is really knowing things that we never really clearly learned about, like what happens in the body when we eat sugar.
Yeah.
And then understand, why do we crave the foods that we crave? Why do we have
Yeah.
the eating behaviors that we have? And these
Yes.
are not,
Yes.
you know, people often think of emotional eating as this thing that starts in your teens or in your 20s. Like it's more of a older person thing. And it's really not. It starts when kids are, you know, eating food basically. So in the
100%.
toddler years, and I will, you know, I work with families that they'll say like, I can't, you know, my 2-year-old is doing this, my 3-year-old is doing this. And so we it starts early, and that's actually an amazing thing to note, because our children, our young children, are so close to their primal nature, right? They are as close as can be to those primal needs, that innate
Mm-hmm.
wisdom. And so when
Mm-hmm.
we see these things, when we see those eating behaviors in young kids, we know that their bodies, that their systems is giving them information.
Yeah.
And so when you can understand, why might someone crave sweet foods? Why might someone really want more salty foods, or more crunchy foods, or more chewy foods, right? When we learn
Yeah.
physiological reasons behind that, and the emotional, like psychological kind of reasons behind that, then we don't, the only move is not like restriction, oh, I have to take that.
Exactly.
It's not about what they're eating, as much as we can understand
Exactly.
why they might be eating that, and they also meaning you.
And
So
yeah, and meet the need that's behind it.
exactly.
And I love it also. And is it safe to say that when we're using this term emotional eating, that it's not a bad thing?
No,
I feel like it comes up as like a bad thing, like, oh, I better avoid this thing called emotional eating. And just even for ourselves, to be able to meet ourselves with compassion, that it doesn't mean anything bad about us, and it doesn't mean it's something that we have to come down hard upon ourselves for,
no, I mean, this is part, I think, when people talk about emotional eating, they're talking about this like compulsive eating behavior, and it's only shared in like a negative light. And to me, I want to always be an emotional eater. I want to feel emotions when I'm eating. I want
I
to
love
connect
that.
to joy and pleasure, and look at my plate of food,
Yeah.
even like holding my cup of tea, like I put it in a beautiful cup. There's
Yes.
things that are
Yes.
pure, that are emotional about this. This is not just a means to an end, check a box and move along, right? I don't want to be a stoic, apathetic eater. So I think that part
Just a minute.
is,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that part's really important, to dispel that myth of emotional eating. And people will often talk about it as like, when I got over my emotional eating, when I healed my emotional eating. And
Mm-hmm.
I will find that the way those people, when I hear those people like talk about the relationship with food at that point, I'm not hearing like pleasure, joy, and positivity.
Exactly.
I hear it as like, now I can control myself. Now I can, I eat for fuel. It's like that kind of message that is not like, it's not a highly connected one.
Just a minute. Sorry. I might have to finish up here. I didn't expect. I thought my door was closed, and it wasn't. So
Well,
we can wrap up.
yeah.
I guess, if that's okay. I'm so sorry for this.
No, it's okay. So joy with food is really so much of understanding why we do what we do. And
Yes.
for most of us, what I find is that when we understand the why behind anything, we are able to immediately have like understanding for ourselves, and then we can have more clarity around, okay, what so
Exactly.
Joy with Food begins on April 16th. We're getting into Pesach, and that there's a whole bunch of stuff that, comes up around food during this time of year. And so this is an amazing program to be available for you, as it starts the weekend after Pesach ends.
Exactly. And I think it's perfect because so often, right after Pesach, I feel like there's a readiness for bringing something new into our lives. I just always feel that after a holiday, this readiness to just start something fresh, start something new. And like you said, springtime, like, it's so perfect.
Yeah, it is. And, so tonight, there's an early bird discount. Rivkie has a coupon code for you, and a link for you for the program. But there's an early bird discount that expires tonight. So if you're listening to this, I'll just say, if you're listening and your body is telling you, like you're feeling like nice exhales and you're feeling your shoulders are down and you feel calm and interested in listening to this will likely be such an incredible gift for you now, for the rest of your life, and for your family. Your body is giving. And so this early bird discount, it goes through, and then start on the 16th. And
Okay.
I would be so overjoyed to support you. And please feel free to reach out with any questions at all. You see all the details on the page. There is a refund period. There's payment plan options.
Amazing.
But message me, message Rivkie. She knows my work as well. And, you know, I'm here to just help you see if this is the right next step for you. And if it's not, I will let you know.
Exactly. Exactly. That sounds amazing. Okay, great. So
Thank you.
we'll share this video. I'll send it to you. You'll be able to post it.
Perfect.
And let's bring lightness back into food.
Yes. So much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.